Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program is about to begin. Please welcome back Concordia's Director of Programming, Anna Dawson.
Hi, thanks everyone. Hope you had a great lunch. Welcome back, and I hope you're ready for a big afternoon of great programming. So I am pleased to invite the Honorable Keith Krach, Chairman of the Krach Institute for Tech Diplomacy at Purdue, and 2022 Nobel Peace Prize nominee, and Natalie Liu, journalist at Voice of America, to the stage.
Hello, Keith.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Keith, it's great to be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Were you surprised to be nominated?
It was, Natalie, and totally humbling. You know, at the end of the day, it's always about the team. And I had just a fantastic bipartisan combination of private sector as well as great career officers at the State Department. And, you know, it also got me thinking about what's going on with Ukraine and the horrible atrocities that are being committed. And when I think about that, I think about we need this trust principle, this clean network alliance of democracies that I was nominated for more than ever. And those are really the courageous people that really inspire me.
Mm-hmm. How does America's operating principles work in terms of promoting, building, constructing peace, both domestically and abroad?
Well, I think, you know, the number one thing is if you look at what these totalitarian regimes do, we affectionately have called that the power principle, one of coercion and bullying and concealment and co-option and deception. And you know, if you look at things that we honor, things like integrity, accountability, respect for rule of law, respect for property of all kinds, respect for sovereignty of nations, respect for the environment, respect for human rights, these are the things that we honor and they don't. And if you think about it, Natalie, if I'm competing against you and I can steal your intellectual property, I don't have to be transparent. I can use slave labor. I can use these coal-fired power plants. I don't have to obey the law, I am the law. I don't have to be reciprocal in my markets. I'm going to win every time. So what the trust principle doctrine did is it actually take these principles and in one jujitsu move, actually used it against them. And that was what we did, for example, to defeat the master plan for the Chinese Communist Party's 5G system. So in other words, we didn't exclude anybody. You just have to live by these principles. So it's very important to maintain that moral high ground. And Natalie, you know, I was asked in my Senate confirmation hearing by Senator Coons, what would be my strategy to combat China's aggression? And I said, you know, I would harness US's three biggest areas of competitive advantage by rallying and unifying our allies and our friends and leveraging the innovation and resource the private sector and amplifying the moral high ground of democratic values. And, when I look at that relationship between Xi and Putin, those principles apply.
Mhm. Talking about governing practices and principles, what's happening in Ukraine reminds people or makes people think more about the question of what governments do at home and the correlation with what they may do abroad. So what are your thoughts concerning governing practices at home or domestic policies and practices in relation to government's policies and practices abroad? If a totalitarian government oftentimes is accused of human rights violations at home, are we more likely to see aggressive behaviors by these governments abroad?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, for example, what Putin's doing in Ukraine, or you look at what Xi wants to do in China, they basically want to export a dictator out of the box. They're a real and urgent threat to democracies. And, if there's anything that I learned, Natalie, serving in the government, that this democracy that we have is a 250-year experiment. And, I grew up in humble means in Ohio, with a white picket fence, the dog averaged 2.5 children. And you've got to fight every day for your freedom and for your democracy. And if it wasn't for the United States, there's so many countries that wouldn't have that freedom, because the natural order of thing is the bad king, the dictator, the emperor. And Natalie, I know with your background, you experienced that firsthand and in spades.
Thank you. And when we think of values building up a society, do you see potential for this country, for America, to heal, to reconcile differences, and to build a democracy even stronger going forward and become less of a vulnerability in the eyes of America's competitors and adversaries alike?
I really do, Natalie. I had a chance last week to teach a few classes to the men and women up at West Point, to the cadets, these transformational leaders of tomorrow. I also had a chance to do that same thing up at the Naval Academy up at Annapolis. And they give me more hope than ever in terms of the future. And I also think, it's been interesting for me, Natalie, because I have 10-year-old twins, as you know, boy-girl twins. And to watch what's going on in Ukraine through their eyes. And I think they understand, they're really learning that freedom is something worth fighting for when they look at these courageous Ukrainians. And I think they're also learning that in order to keep it, you have to put your life on the line.
Mm-hmm. It may be is it fair to call you a self-made man?
Well, I don't know about that, but I've been blessed with the all-American dream, you might say. I mean, I started off in my father's 5-person machine shop, which was 5 people in the good times and 2 people in tough times. I was welding at age 12, and I've really been fortunate. That's why it meant so much to me to be able to serve our nation and give back to this great country that's given so much to me and my family. And that's also why, after my term in office was over, I co-founded the Krach Institute for Tech Diplomacy at Purdue, because if you think about it, our rivals, they're playing the long game, and they're playing for keeps in a game of 4-dimensional military, economic, diplomatic, and cultural chess. And the intersection point is technology, and that's the main battleground. And so what we're doing at the Institute is we're taking some of those things that we developed, that model that we developed in terms of the trust principle and tech statecraft, which integrates Silicon Valley strategies with foreign policy tools based on that trust principle to advance freedom. So, it's my life mission.
I asked you the question about self-made men, partly because in America, not inheriting parents' wealth, house, yes, for sure, but wealth. And even if our parents or grandparents had a lot of money, we would want to know that we made something out of our own lives, with our own lives, our own time on this planet. And so that that individualism is a very strong strain, a very important strain in this society, as well as community service and caring for each other. So if this country values people and the effort to not sit on inheritance, could we say in terms of political values, is it time for this country, for the American people, to not take our inheritance, whether it's people born in this country or people like myself who became naturalized citizens, to not take the political inheritance of democracy for granted, but to work on it, for it, in a more vigilant manner?
By the way, absolutely, without a doubt. I think there's no entitlements when it comes to democracy. That's certainly what I've learned and what I believe in. And, there's no greater gift to give our next generations than freedom. And, that's what we're fighting for. And that's something that we have to always cherish and never take for granted. And, if we're going to, if you look at it, Natalie, there is nothing static about superpower advantage or our freedoms. It can vanish in an instant. And I also believe there's no substitute for American leadership. So every element of our national strength must be brought to bear on a task. Our ideals, our entrepreneurial drive, our industrial spirits, our insistence on fair play, not just for ourselves, but for other nations as well. And the world wants America to lead because we remain a beacon of light and hope for the world.
Talking about other nations, the war in Ukraine has highlighted the importance of alliance. I know in your work as Undersecretary of State for Economic Affairs and Tech Diplomacy, you worked a lot on building, strengthening alliances among democracies, not just democracies or democratic nations in the West, but democracies worldwide, not because they are democracy, just because they're European or American, but they're Asian democracies as well. And explain to us or tell us more about the importance of trading more or democratic alliance, building each other up in a fast-changing global environment, whether it's technology exchange or trading more with each other. Some would say buy more products from fellow democracies, give jobs to our allies and partnered countries.
Yeah.
So share some thoughts there.
Yes, because if you think of those principles of democracy that I talked about that we honor and authoritarian regimes do not, they actually use those against us for their strategic advantage. And, we all believe in free markets, but when somebody comes in a market and doesn't play by the rules, the market is no longer free. It's a fool's market. That's why you've got to do something about it. And if you think of these totalitarian regimes, particularly the totalitarian twins like Putin and Xi, these guys believe in bullying. And yeah, one of the things that was interesting, that my 10-year-old twins came running up to my office when this Ukraine invasion happened, because they saw it on TV. And they said, Dad, you got to go on TV. I go, well, what? Why do I have to go on TV? And they said, well, you got to go tell everybody people are dying. We got to go help them. And I go, well, how we do that? He said, well, Dad, that's the clean network alliance of democracies, because even they know that from the playground, that when you have a bully, you can confront that bully and you can win if you have your trusted friends by your side. And so, if you look at what China and Russia's strategy is, it's to rewrite history, pick off the weak gazelle from the herd and go after them. And when you have a clean network of alliances, like what we did to defeat 5G, you have 60 countries, 2/3 of the world's global GDP, hundreds of companies, then you have strength in numbers and you have power in unity and solidarity. And that's the key, because America can't do it alone.
Mm-hmm. Talking about strength in numbers, America is a country that has different political parties. America prides itself on a multi-party system, on competitive politics. And yet, some of this democratic feature sometimes is viewed as a inconvenience, quote unquote, in the sense that successive administrations don't carry out the previous administration's policies, making things a bit ineffective, in contrast with authoritarian or totalitarian regimes' continuous policy. What are your thoughts on that? And I understand you, even though you worked for the last administration, you are quite you're very much in conversation with officials working in areas like of econ and trade and the geopolitical areas you worked on. Can you tell us something about that?
Absolutely. One of the things I think that I'm really proud about our team is all the initiatives that we put together are carried on by the Biden administration. So these things that we put in place, like the Clean Network Alliance of Democracies, the Blue Dot Network, which is an equitable and unifying alternative to the One Belt, One Road, our work in strengthening ties with Taiwan, all those things have now represented a bridge from a Republican administration to a Democratic administration. A few weeks ago, I was with Secretary Gina Raimondo in terms of passing the U.S. Innovation and Competitive Act, which was a bill that we designed for research funding for critical technology sectors, and then also for onshoring semiconductors. And then just yesterday, I was with Kurt Campbell, who's really President Biden's Asian czar. And, what he said to me, he said, Keith, you were the first guy who called me up and, told me the challenges that I would face. And it's very rare in government that next administration will carry those policies forward. He goes, we've carried literally almost all of your policies going forward. And I think that unity and that continuity of policy is so important for our allies. And there's nothing that scares the heck out of the totalitarian twins than a United States.
Thank you, Keith. We only have a little more than a minute left. And I wanted you to share some thoughts on entrepreneurs and companies, multinational companies' role in enhancing or safeguarding democratic values, both at home and abroad. Your thoughts?
Yeah, one of the things I did when I was undersecretary is I went back home to Silicon Valley. I hosted 36 to the top global CEOs. You've heard of all their names. And, my message to them was, out here in Silicon Valley, we say corporate responsibility is social responsibility, but it's also national security and global economic security too, because these totalitarian regimes not only represent a real and urgent threat to democracy, but they represent a real and urgent threat to your businesses, because they don't want to just compete. They want to put you out of business, and they want to do it by not playing by the rules. And so leveraging the innovation, the resources of the private sector, this, and I could see it in the government, this is such a huge opportunity for the United States and the rest of the free world that is literally untapped. And we really need to rally these industrial companies. We need to rally the tech titans because that's such a great, great strength that we have.
Well, thank you very much, Keith. Glad we could share these thoughts and with the audiences here today.
Great. Well, thanks so much for Natalie, and all my best to the folks at Concordia and a continued great conference.